So this is our time to have an open conversation about the practice, and in particular, most importantly today, would be questions about Chenrezig. But not intended to derail any issue or thing that you want to talk about.
Is the mic on?
Mic is on.
It's just pointing towards him.
Yeah. How's that? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a pretty simple question, I guess. So with the visualization, we end up having, after we pay homage, we end up having our form as Chenrezig and still a Chenrezig on top of our head, right? So and then do all the other beings present also have that form too?
At that point in the dissolution?
Yeah, before the dissolution.
Where in the practice are you talking about?
So we started with the Hri and sent out that light, and then they ended up with the Hri, and then it kind of ended up as an offering, and then everyone ended up with a Chenrezig on top of their head first, right? And then we paid homage, and everyone ended up as Chenrezig with the Chenrezig on top of their head still.
Yeah.
Okay.
Depending upon the particular teacher or teaching that you are hearing or reading about, these things can be condensed or expanded a little bit.
Okay, I was kind of getting that gray fuzzy zone.
Yep. And so then you can end up like not sure where something happened.
Yeah.
And
it seems like sometimes
we did some of that this morning. And actually, I confess it was intentional. and the reason was I wondered how many people would be confused or nobody or what, because then the best way to raise a question is to actually have a question. So you don't just make it up. So it's a good question.
Ooh.
When you get to the homage, all beings have Chenrezig on the crown of their heads at that time. Following the homage is a little bit more vague, a little bit, because then you have the question of where the homage fits in relationship to the period of purifying the realms. That can be long or short, and so then there could be a question in there too, like where exactly did something happen? But you didn't ask that question, so now it's too late.
Somebody else could though.
We'll talk about that.
Which?
What you just said, that she didn't ask the question, but what you do if... I'm just curious to hear what you had to say about it. I mean, I probably haven't...
Is it about Tongtong Gyalpo's prayer?
Yeah, all of that.
Because that can be confusing, because his prayer, that prayer is an insert.
Right.
So almost anytime you put an insert into an existing text, you change the order of things a little bit, right? And so Tongtong Gyalpo's prayer is an elaboration in there. And if you read the elaboration, but then you didn't read the little summary of it because the elaboration replaced the summary, then there can be a confusion. It's kind of like if you are going to make ice cream and somebody says, just take it out of the freezer and put it in a bowl and eat it, and that's what you think is making ice cream, that's good. But the day that they say make ice cream and they point at that thing that you have to turn the handle on and put salt in, then you don't know what comes first. It's like, when do things happen now? So, Tongtong Gyalpo's prayer comes kind of, in the way it's in the text, it comes after the 7-point mind training. However,
Seven branch prayer.
the 7-branch prayer, I'm sorry.
We just made added a new release.
That's how whole lineages go off track.
Not necessarily off track. That
That's
could
true.
have
They
started
put
a
back on
beautiful
track.
thing.
Well, it's not 7-point mind training. It's the 7-branch prayer. And the 7-branch prayer, sitting there, it's right after that prayer that we normally insert Tongtong Gyalpo's prayer. And the issue really isn't, let's just go to the text, because this confusion has happened a number of times. So maybe if enough of you know it, you'll straighten it out and no one will ever ask me again. And that would really be good.
Dream on.
Yeah, dream on, right. Okay, the 7-branch prayer starts on page 17 and ends on page 22, I guess it is, huh? Yeah, 23 is where we insert the prayer for Gelong Pema Karpo, the one that he says he recalls from having heard it in a previous life. And it's also, just as an aside, Kala Rinpoche, so my understanding of it is that Kala Rinpoche actually inserted this prayer into this text. And this is one of the ways in which a text like Chenrezi, which is practiced, that's like ubiquitous, right? Everybody practices Chenrezi. So whose practice is it? Does it belong to the Gelugs? Does it belong to the Kagyus? Does it belong to the Sakyas, the Nyingmas? Like, whose prayer is this anyway? And the answer to that partly is, who inserted what? And in this case, putting in Pema Karpo's prayer actually more correctly makes it a Shangpa practice. So that was, I remember Kala Rinpoche in an old school where we were getting teachings from him in San Francisco. He said this prayer, and it was the first time I heard that it was a prayer that this person, Pema Karpo, or that he'd heard, that he remembered saying that in a previous life. And I think he particularly liked that somehow. And so he put this prayer in there. Now, it may have already been inserted, I don't know, before, but he mentioned it at that time. So, and then later on, I believe it was Ken MacLeod who told me, like many years later, like at least 10 years later, this is the way in which you sort of merge another practice or prayer or something in with your lineage. Is that you put an insert with it. And if it was the Sakya tradition, they would have put a different insert into it. And it really, apparently it's an established method for it. You don't change the original text at all. You just leave it like it is. Then there's no wars about it. And at the same time, you can look in the text and you can see, oh, I see, this is like a practice that's done by this lineage and all.
Okay.
In fact, they sometimes do change little things. But so you go to page 23, and you can start the practice there of purifying the realms. However, if you didn't put this insert in, and the only reason to even say what I'm about to say is that if you don't put the insert in, and even if you do put it in, there's a point at which it can be confusing, like, what are you doing here? And that point is, it's life after life, isn't it? 28,
31?
page 27.
Oh.
Is it page 27? It's 30.
Well, are you looking for the,
31 and 29.
No, I don't
The
know.
life after life is page 29.
Well, the life after life is
human realm?
It's 31, page 29.
31,
Oh, different.
but 27 is the end of
Same text.
Tong Tong Gyalpos?
No, no.
No, no.
Where am I?
That's 30.
30 is the end of Tonkin Gill.
Okay.
Oh,
Hey.
Isn't there another spot that's confusing?
yes.
Apparently.
Isn't there a less confusing spot?
Probably after
Are
the
you-
mantra.
Are you going to be talking about the succession of transformation of beings in different realms, and at the
Yeah.
human realm, then
That's right.
voila, that's us.
Huh?
That's us. Oh, now it's our turn. So we become Chenrezig at that point.
That's right.
Or you could do it at page 31.
And well, you could also do the transformation right after the homage. Yeah. Exactly, right after the homage.
Because that's what I was thinking that you said at one point, and then when you get to that place on page 31 where it's sort of like summarizing, and then you do the mantra.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, the summary is by praying one pointedly in
Right.
this manner.
Yeah.
That's the transition point there. But there's the other one,
Which would be page 27.
which is 27, and it's just really the coming to the end of the insert, Tong Tong Gyalpo's insert, on page 27.
No,
Isn't it?
9.
no. 20,
You're right.
30 is the end of the
27 is nothing.
No, 27. No, it's not. That's the human realm. That's the human realm, and that would be the spot. That would be the spot where, if you would again go.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, that's it. I got it, yep. Yeah. In other words, it's in the middle of this prayer.
Yeah.
So if you did the transformation right after the homage, then the purification would be kind of wholesale. That is to say, all beings kind of all at once, you'd be doing it. Though even then you could do it individually. There wouldn't be any problem with that. But it's summarized there. So that's where it becomes confusing, because in the most condensed state, you finish the homage, and then you do the purification of the realms, and so all beings become Chenrezig at that time.
Which
And you might do that before, after, or instead of the 7 branch prayer. Like there's no instruction for that.
the most concise version would go from the homage on page 15 directly to page 31.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when it says by praying one pointedly in this manner, that can be, oh, that's what we just did here on page 15.
That's what we just did.
Right.
Yeah, so normally when you get to the end of Tong Tong Gyalpo's prayer, and you read by praying one pointedly in this manner, you naturally think, that's what I just did, is pray one pointedly in this manner. But that page actually references all the way back to the homage. So it can be confusing, like, didn't I just do that, or is something else coming? But it's really one of them is summarized and the other one isn't. So I think that it's worth, I easily get confused about these things at this point in my life, but I can say, when I did look at this some 20 years ago really carefully, it was really helpful. Not because this puzzle was resolved, but because I was resolving the puzzle. And resolving the puzzle made things become clear by the effort of trying to link things up, like, where did we go here exactly? And then also because it was in a Dharma center in San Francisco, and the Lama there would often just insert bingo, like and you just, the whole train derails, right? And he's carrying on and finishing and done, and everybody's sitting there with question marks above their head instead of a re. What happened? And so it was
Pages
just
in their
helpful to
lap.
sit down all by myself, not really knowing very much about the practice, but having recognized there's something strange about this thing here. So I think if you read the text carefully, so the people on 3-year retreat have to do this all the time because they don't know hardly any of the practices they're getting new. So they have to sit down with the text and really read it carefully and think, now we're going from here to there. Oops, no, we have to go over here from there until it becomes clear. And then they have an insight, which is, well, that's kind of satisfying. I figured out how it works. And then they engage in the practice differently. So I think you will do the same thing. If you take the text now with what's just said, or maybe we need to say it once more, and you can write it down, and maybe Bill needs to say it once more, and we can write it down. And then sit down with the text and just look line by line. You only need to do the English. You don't even need the rest of it at this point. And just go through it and see, like, the order, that makes sense. Just like that makes sense. And I see where it came from. Started here, it ended there, which was a new beginning. And we went from there to there. And you can kind of see the pieces in there. Pema Karpo's prayer is a big insert in this practice. And it pretty much takes the small piece of the practice that could have come right after the homage, like immediately after the homage. It takes that piece and elaborates it by 5-fold, at least 10-fold. So when you connect those things up, and then you get to the last pages which say, having meditated in this way, then you can see, oh, I see what it's pointing at. Because the thought can be like, in what way? Meditating, well, what is this talking about here? So it looks like you had 2 inserts near the end that pretty much said something similar. Pat.
So isn't the 7-branch prayer an insert too?
Say that again.
The 7-branch prayer is an insert as well, right?
That's right, yeah.
So here's my question. In some practices, isn't the 7-branch prayer after refuge? Could you put the 7-branch prayer after refuge before the description?
Right
The
after refuge.
visualization.
Right after refuge?
Yeah.
Where are you thinking? What practice are you thinking?
Maybe Guru Yoga.
Wait a minute. Are you asking a Guru Yoga question?
No, my question has to do with where you could put the 7-branch prayer.
In
If you could
Chenrezi.
put it before
Or-
the visualization. If it's an insert.
Oh, before the visualization.
Because it's an offering, right?
Yeah, it isn't like that.
Well,
And a request, but you visualize and then you offer to the
But
visualization.
you are doing a
You
visualization
bow
when you go
to
for
the
refuge.
visualization and you offer, oh, I see what
Yeah.
you've already got your visualization.
yeah, but there's no commandment that says you can't do the visualization more or less twice. So it's like, the 7 branch. I think thinking of the 7-branch prayer as just an offering is a mistake. You look at that prayer and you will see that every practice in the Mahayana is stuck into those 7 branches. It's like, it's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. And it's considered really important. I just heard a few days ago, or couple of weeks ago, that the Karmapa had asked that the entire Moonlam be codified into the 7 branches. Have you heard that?
I mean, all the prayers within the Monlam to be
Big,
classified
yeah,
according
yeah.
to branches.
Yeah, put into the big book of the 7 branches, kind of, for want of a better. I heard that. I thought, wow, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. So I haven't heard it a second time, and I don't know. So we'll see. But it could happen. Something like that could happen, and there we would have like an enormous compendium potentially of 7 branches of versions, and you could look at maybe more than 20 different versions of the 3rd branch or something, and see like all sorts of things. It would be rather interesting to see that. But it's really, the 7 branches are really ubiquitous in our practices. They are in every practice, and sometimes they're not specifically referenced, and you don't have it there as something to actually recite, but it's still it's inherent in the system that those practices are part of all the pieces. So I don't, Pat, is that doesn't work for you?
I'm still just wondering why you couldn't put it after refuge.
I don't know why. Do you know why?
After refuge, before bodhicitta.
No.
Oh yeah.
She means before like the visualization, right?
Yeah.
You say refuge, bodhicitta, and then do it.
Have you seen it? How radical have we seen?
Well, why? Why do you
Why?
wanna? Yeah, I'm curious.
Why not?
Well,
I
why
knew that
not
was coming.
change everything?
I guess where it comes from is, it is an insert, it isn't part of the group text.
Yeah, that's true.
So, therefore, why not
Why-
insert
yeah.
it after refuge?
Yeah, why not put the visualization itself before refuge?
Well, you do have a visualization before refuge, but it's just not the same one. Okay, I'll just let it go.
I think
It's
Zopa
all right,
actually
I don't-
answered the question in terms of that if when the way we work with the kind of the syntax or kind of the grammar, the whole structure of Vajrayana practice, that bringing to mind whatever the object is of the particular practice, whether it's Tara or Chenrese or whatever it is, to bring that to mind first, and then we offer the prostrations and praises and the offerings and the confession, and all the rest of this. So it's part of stepping into the relationship with that with the bodhisattva / yidam of whatever practice it is.
Okay,
So
I can accept.
yeah, it's hard. It's kind of hard to answer the question without like a compendium of the grammar of Vajrayana, just kind of like that at your fingertips. But it is kind of like, but we're all thinking, well, that's not exactly how we would say it in English. You know, it's kind of somebody says
Right.
something in English as a second language, and you're not sure exactly what the grammar rule is that they just broke. But it's like, that wasn't quite right. We don't generally say it that way, but with some kind of sense of how the Vajrayana is structured, the practices are structured, then these things kind of flow together. But it's more a matter of a flow and a way to look at it in a way that supports a relationship as opposed to a rule that you can't do it this other way. It's a little clearer when we do it this way. It supports.
It's fine.
Yeah. Do you have an order?
Yes, she's next. I didn't know. Okay. It's a continuation on when the visualizations happen. I've been doing this only a few years, not Chenrezig, but Buddhist practice. And it seems that we take refuge and then we take refuge again. We do the Samchen Tamche in the beginning and then we do it at the end. So it seems like I'm already familiar with a pattern of we do things and we repeat it, whether it's an insert or not. And so then I don't know if it's because baby steps at the visualization that I am seeing the light go out and come back and set off the other lights and then come back and then at a certain point be Chenrezig. But just like in my shamatha, I am in touch with the shamatha and then I lose it and come back to it. And so in the same way with my visualizations, whether it's set up in the text or it's just my baby step training wheel practice, sometimes it's the Hri and sometimes it's Chenrezig. And then as I go back into a new thing, and as I go in and out of my maintaining one-pointedness, it goes in and out of becoming Chenrezig again, being nothing, being the Hri, being Chenrezig again, everybody being Chenrezig, I being Chenrezig, calling up the tears that it's like, oh yeah, I really am Chenrezig and they really are. Yeah, how wonderful. And then, but it comes and goes. And sometimes I think that coming and going is my baby steps. And sometimes I think it's the text order and insertions. And sometimes I think maybe it's letting go of the solidity of stuff and just let it come and go. Just like when I'm doing prostrations, I've already done the visualization, but when I'm doing the prostrations, the small room is filling up with everybody I've ever been on retreat with and passed on the street and all the teachers and the Dharma. And yeah, I visualized that before, and I'm supposedly done with that, but in the middle of the prostrations, and as they continue, the place is just filling up. The visualization grows richer. So when I get to the repeating the Om Mani Padme Hum, the visualization just grows stronger. And then it weakens and then it grows stronger again. So is that wrong?
Why is it not just a distraction?
Because when I come back to it just as in from any distraction.
Just what?
As with any distraction, when I come back to it, I come back to it.
Right.
I get distracted. Yeah.
So?
But sometimes it seems like it's not necessarily a distraction, but maybe just very loosely holding it. Mm-hmm. And that's probably presumptuous on my part, so I don't usually think that.
Well, you don't necessarily need to label it a distraction.
Okay.
But I think it's important to recognize the difference between a distraction, and there's different kinds of distractions.
Uh-huh.
So if you're engaged in the generation of the visualization, like we talked about, mm-hmm. and you find that your mind kind of drifts away, and mm-hmm. then you come back, mm-hmm. The coming back is good. Mm-hmm. The leaving is a distraction. Mm-hmm. But distractions don't destroy our practice. It's kind of like it could be drizzling outside and it wouldn't necessarily destroy a walk. Mm-hmm. It's just that's what happens. Mm-hmm. We're not stable in our minds. Mm-hmm. Or worse, we're stable but in ways that are negative.
Yeah.
I hate everybody. Always have, always will. It's kind of that sort of stability. But this is also there's nothing wrong with what you're saying or what you say you're doing. There's nothing wrong with it. It's perfect. But we don't sit down with any practice, even shamatha, in the most simple iteration of it. We don't sit down with it and the mind just like settles down and its insights unfold and we understand that actually we're resting in the awakened mind itself. If we have those experiences, we probably took a major detour somewhere. So we understand. You recognize the distraction. You recognize the distraction, and you bring the mind back. Mm-hmm. Or it can be that you have trained well enough so that you don't overtly, consciously, oh, there's a distraction. It's more like the distraction arises, you see it, and the next thing is you're just back to the practice again. But I wouldn't confuse those pieces. Like there's a piece of it which is the formal practice, and then there's the distraction, which may not be a serious infringement of what is going on with the practice, but it's some little thing. And I guess my advice would be, to the best of your ability, for some fairly long period of time, do the practice as it is laid out. And call that the practice. So the freedom issues here, we often I want to be able to do with it what I want to do with it. That's kind of a mistake. It's kind of like you want to drive your car like you want to drive it too, but for some people that means the rest of us don't want to be on the road.
Right.
So you want to do things with the practice, but do those things kind of offline, as it were. Like engage in the practice like it's laid out. There's a ton of freedom in there. Do you know where that is? You already said.
With the letting go.
Sure.
Not the letting go completely, but the letting go of what I think I'm doing.
Yeah,
The
but how
type-
about
the
what you're
type-
doing and what you think of it? Isn't that freedom? I mean, the real issue is here, do you have the freedom to actually follow the thing exactly like it is? And do you have the freedom to do it different than that? And do you have the freedom to actually see what's happening and alter it if need be? All those things are this freedom thing. Don't make too much out of it. As the real issue is can you attain realization? So you will not attain realization, I think we've all heard many times, by being a slave to the form, precisely. On the other hand, we all agree, I think, even worse is to make your own practice. That'll never come around. So you're kind of caught in this place. Sometimes we make too much out of the freedom, as if that was freedom from samsara. But we've had the freedom to be in samsara, and now it appears we don't actually have the freedom to get out of it so easily. So I would say the big deal here is confidence also. We need to feel confident in the practice. So just following it exactly, like for example, reading the text from one end to the other and never paying attention to what it is that you're doing. Well, we have the freedom to do that, but does that freedom lead to anything other than just mush? So I think what we want to do, and the reason why I think we were saying, like look at the text exactly and see where these inserts are and all, it's because then you come to a kind of sense of ownership, not of the text, not of the origins of the practice, but an ownership of the practice. That is to say, it's your practice. It's you who will benefit or not benefit. And so you need to discover the benefit that comes from engaging in the practice exactly as it's laid out. And then you can start doing things like, well, I think I'll put a longer 7-branch prayer in. Or today maybe I don't have time to put the 7-branch, or maybe I just have to do the root text today. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to recite that lineage prayer, even though I don't know who any of these people are, but I know that there are a lot of people behind this prayer. So I would like to just in my own stream of being honor that. So I recite the thing. And in that way you're kind of like in the trench with the practice as it is laid out, and at the same time making routine discoveries about your own proclivities and your own wishes and your, the way that you betray yourself and the way that you honor yourself, and we do these things and don't often see them. So here you have the opportunity to see them.
Is it also the level of my own understanding at any time? Like, parsing the text now might be very different than if after more listening of you and another 5
Oh, yeah.
years of practice, I would parse it or understand it differently.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you already have. You know, that's just natural, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
There's an art in it, I think, in a certain way, to use that word kind of loosely. I think there's an art of the discipline of the text. Could you, in fact, close the text completely after you know it really well and engage in the entire practice without a single word uttered?
Yeah. I think that's possible.
And then you might see, well, I really like this. And then you discover a few weeks later, the real reason I'm doing it is I'm just kind of lazy about it. And so then you have to wonder, like, well, I wonder, what does that work? Well, maybe, maybe not. Like, if you don't encounter those things, there's something wrong. The experiment here is really important, and it's also important to know how to do the text exactly as it's laid out. It's kind of like, you know, the wheel falls off your car on the rear. You want to put the spare on exactly right. And then, like, learn how spares work and wheels turn and all that stuff.
Thank you.
Okay.
The lady in white.
I got lost when in the dissolution when you were, I think we were melting Chenrezi into the Shri in your heart.
The Shri?
Oh, I just I said I got a false tooth. I got
Oh, okay.
new language.
Okay, you're excused.
How do you want to say it?
Free.
Free.
Like HRI comes
Free.
pretty close.
Free. Okay. Shri. No, free. Anyway, when you were dissolving into your heart,
Yeah.
and then, so could you repeat that? That was new for me. Chenrezi is dissolving, and somehow we had the lotus flower and the moon disk in our heart, and the three was there. And how did Chenrezi? What was that? For me, it's always been just the Chenrezi into my heart.
I see. I see. Okay, two things. One is, I think as one of the issues is there are a number of variations on a number of the aspects of Chenrezi. So when you hear things from various teachers, it's quite possible, even you might say likely, that you will hear different things. Because there's so many variations. The practice has been around for so long, and so many teachers. I get confused about which piece it is that we're now doing with it, and so that makes it difficult. But having said that, your question's totally valid. I actually think that probably Bill can do a better job on this than I can.
I just realized that what I was taught was that Chenrezi dissolves into light and then dissolves into me. And we are, the language was, and we are of one flavor, inseparable. That was from His Holiness Druk. In my memory, which you know.
Yeah, well, your memory's like my memory. I know you. I think actually Bill has a handle on this that will be helpful to listen to. What do you think? Is it okay?
Yeah.
All right.
The dissolution stage, there are different approaches to the dissolution stage. And there is a way in which the one that you just mentioned, where dissolve, and then we are of one taste.
Right.
You could say that's actually a more advanced approach. Because for that to really be, got to get to the heart of the dissolution stage, that really would require some kind of insight into the nature of appearances arising, union of appearance and nature of mind. The training wheels approach to the dissolution stage also has some variety to it. But if we just, we can be more complex or simpler. And neither the more complex nor the simpler is necessarily the best way or the most advanced way or the beginner way. But the principle, when the environment dissolves and the environment dissolves into all the beings that we're imagining, that we're connecting with, they're all present. The environment dissolves into those beings. Those beings dissolve into Chenrezig on the crown of our head. Chenrezig dissolves into us as Chenrezig. And then, as Michael mentioned it in the description, the Chenrezig, ourselves as Chenrezig, dissolves into the Three at the heart. And you can have more or less elaboration with all these stages, but then the Three at the heart dissolves into itself. And then we're left, we just, and the more that we can actually just be absorbed in ourselves as Chenrezig and not ourselves observing ourselves as Chenrezig, the more we can just kind of be in that, and that just dissolves into itself, and then we just, it's even beyond the idea of then we rest in that. It's just we just allow that to rest. We just meet that experience.
Thank you. That's very well
So
said.
there's something there, but we can go through all kinds of different ways to approach that, and some of them are just as simple as just allowing all the appearance to just dissolve into the space of mind. We want to say the space of something, or we want to say into, but it's actually witnessing that dissolving, and having some kind of connection with that. And one of the things that becomes challenging is when we want to sustain something, which gets us back into the problem of trying to manage our experience and prefer our experience to be one way or another. So
Can I
that
just
resting there.
Go back to the very beginning of what you were saying about we visualized all beings as having this Chenrezig, and then we're going to have all these beings dissolve into us.
In stages, that short circuits just a little bit. Probably wouldn't, if you kind of got the whole sense of it. Exactly how you did it wouldn't matter so much, but there is a way to do it, and that's the thing that Michael said. If we actually really do become familiar with a way to do it, but it's not even that we're seeing other beings with Chenrezig above their head. Other beings are Chenrezig at this point. For really doing this approach. So all beings as Chenrezig
are Chenrezig,
and we are Chenrezig.
Okay.
And so the environment dissolves into all beings as Chenrezig. They dissolve into light, absorbed into Chenrezig on the crown of our head, dissolves into light, into our form, dissolves.
Got it, thank you.
And one of the things that we can do to avoid becoming kind of stressed out about, well, what do we do now? Because we want something to do. We have kind of the existential equivalent of needing to knit to do something. So to avoid getting stuck with that, it's like, well, I know it's not knitting, but then what is it going to be? It's going to just go back and do the dissolution again. And you can do that over and over and over again. And just that gives you the kind of the space to do something, and then also the opportunity to cultivate the possibility of not doing something and seeing what might happen there. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Thank you.
I do have an outline of just it's a very rough outline of the steps in the practice and the just kind of little pointers to what generally speaking is the visualization at different stages, and it also includes which parts are actually the root text and which aren't. So that can be helpful.
And how does one get a hold of that?
Do you have extras?
Fly across.
You grab him like this, pull him down,
Yeah.
take it away from him.
Attack mode.
Yeah, no,
What's every time?
I brought some along today. I thought, well, that's pretty dumb for them to sit in a folder.
Yeah.
Well,
They're
I
working
love
on
one.
themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there's also, there are actually two different things. One is an outline, it's called an outline of the visualization for the practice of Chenrezig, and the other one is a summary of the elements of the visualization. And that's the parts that you were mentioning about, well, the one face relates to this, that's a manifestation. It's kind of a way that we get to see that Chenrezig experiences one taste. And the four arms, that's a way that we can recognize the four immeasurables as part of so the pure meaning. So they're two things. And it's, we could make you do it the old-fashioned way, and you just have to listen to this over and over again until it occurred to you that you actually needed to make a list yourself.
Oh, no, that's not good. Memory issues.
That's how these books are.
And that's how we learn.
Thank you.
So why don't you?
Lama Michael, I want to run
You
a
want to what?
comparison by you.
Will you say that again? You want to
I
what?
want to run a comparison. So, we do Chenrezig practice here. And then we do shamatha practice. And shamatha practice, the attention, the object that you teach us here is on the breath, right? Of course, there are other objects too that you've taught us on retreat, but primarily the breath.
Primarily which?
The breath.
The breath, yeah.
So recently, I was thinking about this, and it is said that the Buddha, he had two forms of meditation that he did. One was a meditation on something infinite, and there I use it. Okay, they're just words. But the other form of meditation that he did was on great compassion. So he spent his time meditating on those two. And I thought to myself, I've never, at least I don't think I've been in a situation where I've been taught meditation on compassion. And maybe it's just me. Maybe you or anybody else at the center have taught us, but maybe I haven't been exposed to it. And then, in a whole other context, I was reading, where Matthew Ricard was saying that he went into the lab.
Matthew who?
Matthew
Ricard.
Ricard?
Oh, yeah.
Ricard.
Oh, yeah.
He was saying he went into the lab and he was told,
Yeah.
now do shamatha, now do loving
Right,
kindness.
right.
Okay? And so, he's been taught also, and he's part of our tradition, Tibetan tradition, Nyingma. So, my question is, have you taught us shamatha or meditation on one of the four immeasurables, other than, of course, the Tonglen, right, where we do, but that's a different thing, it seems. Does my question make sense?
Your question makes sense. But you can't say, you can only say that you haven't received instruction on compassion by removing the pieces of instruction you've received on compassion. In other words, why are you saying except for Tonglen, for example? Why is that? Why do you put that aside like that's not it? And any instruction that you receive on the essence of bodhicitta, for example, is instruction on compassion. And four measurables for sure, of course. They're part of the 7-point mind training also. But I'm curious why you're thinking that you haven't received it unless you very carefully avoided those particular classes.
No, no, I mean, what I didn't mean, yes, you're absolutely right. Those qualities show up,
Yeah.
okay, when you practice Tonglen. But really what I mean is shamatha, taking loving kindness or compassion as the object of meditation. I haven't done that.
Oh, I see. And when you say that, taking loving kindness or compassion as the object of meditation, I take that to mean taking my experience of loving kindness as the object of meditation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, yes.
So that could be in a number of ways. You could have the experience of loving kindness that you intentionally developed, right?
Yeah.
And then while you're having that experience, you put your awareness on the experience of the loving kindness or the compassion.
Right.
Right? Is that what you're talking about?
That's my interpretation when I hear, what the Buddha was doing or what Matthew Ricard was doing. That's exactly my interpretation. But I've never done that.
There's a little problem with that. It's like we don't actually know what they were doing. So just to put ourselves in a space.
Conjecture.
Yeah, it's conjecture, I think. And even when we talk about the Buddha, I sometimes have a little bit of trouble. I'm not sure. Like, how do we know what the Buddha was doing? So I think
this is what's written, and this is what I read.
Yeah. For me, that doesn't kind of have an equal sign between what's written and knowing what the Buddha did. So I get that maybe will cause me to be struck dead by lightning, but I just don't. And I think that we each have a little different place in that. So this doesn't answer your question, but it answers something about my relationship to it. I have great confidence that the Buddha did something. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here 2,600 years later. So he must have done something during that time. But when I hear kind of exact things about what he did, and then I also read that actually the great majority of the practices that we involve ourselves in, when we just talk about the numbers of practices, it definitely came after his life. The lineages, all of these pieces that came together. And so I find that my relationship in terms of I can feel things and know things is actually a little bit deeper in regards to the lineages than it is to the history of the Buddha. Because I have it's maybe a personal block of some kind. I have trouble just taking for granted that because I heard somebody say that the Buddha did X, Y, and Z, unless it's an incredibly generic description of meditation, I find myself not relying upon it. I rely upon my own teachers in this life more than I do upon the Buddha. And when the teacher says, the Buddha did X, Y, and Z, and then connects it to what that teacher is doing, then I feel a sense of I can relate to it because now I have a connection here with this thing. It doesn't come so easy to me. It's not like a novel or something where I can read it and my confidence and whether or not it really happened or not is not important. I feel like my lack of confidence in whether or not something really happened more than 2,000 years ago or 2,600 years ago, if I had to rely on that, I'm not sure I'd be sitting here.
True. So Lama Michael, even if you set that aside, I mean, I have more confidence in personally in what Matthew writes.
Yeah.
Okay? And if he says he was, this is the instruction that was given to him,
Yeah.
and he was told, okay, do it, then the question in my mind is, I think what he was doing was he was meditating on the experience that he was generating.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And
I think it's true with Matthew in particular.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, oh yes, I mean, well, yeah, there's so much more to say on that. You're exactly right. But I think the other place that also it shows up is if you look in the tradition on the 40 different objects of meditation,
Mm-hmm.
the kasinas and all of those.
Yeah.
One of them had actually the boundless qualities.
Yeah.
You can take those as your object of meditation
Sure.
instead of taking the breath.
Yeah.
And very simply, that's my question: is if that is something that I wanted to do and develop, how could I do that?
Well, my first thought, which may not be the best thought, but I'll say it anyway. My first thought is that you have all the tools to do that. You have all the tools. The question is, so you have all the tools to rest your awareness upon, for example, the boundless qualities. But in order to rest your awareness on that, you have to have the boundless qualities. So we all do have inherently those qualities, but in order to rest your awareness on it, you have to have the living experience of it right now in order to rest your awareness on it. So I think that can, for most people, be a real obstacle, is that they're stepping beyond where their own practice and realization is sometimes. And unless you're talking about putting your awareness upon the conceptual understanding of the boundless qualities, which of course you can do that easy already. We don't even need to talk about that because you can read about it and do it. But I think what we're really trying to get at here is, let's go back to compassion. You can put your awareness, you can use compassion as the object of your awareness too. I mean, you can use any experience as the object of your meditation. And it's a profound part of the practice. It's not easy to put your awareness on your own experience, as you may have discovered.
Yeah.
As soon as you do, the experience is like, whoops, it's not what, it changes. It just changes. It's like you had a black dot, you put your awareness on it, hey, it's yellow. It's just, the experience changes. This is kind of like quantum physics, it's in a certain way. You look at it, it's different. Just to observe your own experience is to change the experience. No question about it. I mean, I would challenge anyone to say, anyone who was not the Buddha, or that, I would say, I don't know that you can put your awareness on your experience and actually rest it there and the experience is stable. That looks to me like that's really difficult. Now, to put your awareness there, and it's okay that it wiggles and moves, but now you're not putting your, let's say it's compassion, for example. Suddenly the compassion turns into aversion of some kind. So you keep your awareness there, and now you suddenly have your awareness on the aversion. Or maybe you have the awareness on the, hey, what happened to my compassion? So there's a whole series of things there then that arise that are very personal for the meditator, right? Very personal for the meditator. And it becomes a very kind of personal meditation. Now, I think we can all do that, and it's a profound meditation to do that. If you can't do it and you want to know how to do it, my best response to that is investigate the 4 mindfulness practices. The 4 mindfulness practices are a, you're familiar with them, I believe.
Yeah, 4 foundations.
So
yes.
they're a progressive. It's like walking up the steps into the door. It's like stage by stage you get closer and closer to it. So I think that those are a great set of practices. If you're familiar with them, that's what I would do.
I see.
I mean,
I agree with you. I think that when I read it, the way that it was written, I think it was Matthew's writing that where he says that he wasn't talking about himself. He was just talking about somebody in the lab. I'm sure he was one of them.
somebody in the lab.
Yeah.
The
I'm
brain
sure he's
when they wire
he's-
them up.
The
Yeah,
monkey
that's
in the
exactly
lab.
right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's being modest, but the point is that there was enough of a meditation there where there was a change in the reading of the device.
Sure.
So I think that those meditators had the experience of it.
Oh, what's it?
The experience of loving kindness. I mean, that it was very stable for them. That's my interpretation. If a physical instrument can get that, I think what was going on in the mind was very well established. That's what I think.
And the point would be?
And my point is, wow, I couldn't do that.
I like that for a point. But what are you going to do with it?
Right.
It's just so beautiful.
Because you can't frame it and put it on a wall.
No, but there are, I mean, it's just,
I think you're saying you want that.
yes, I want that.
And so the real question is back to the beginning, how are you going to do that?
That's right.
And I think we just walked through a number of possibilities. Did you take notes?
No, I heard you. I'm just disappointed.
I think the four mindfulness foundations are spectacular, actually. I think some people, and maybe you're one of those people, will find those too clear.
I love those practices, but the way that I think you're telling me to do them is interesting. I have to think about it a little bit.
What's the way?
Because what I am thinking of is shamatha. And I think it is shamatha with loving kindness as an object.
Yeah.
And when I look at the 4 foundations, at least in the way that I practice it, is more of, investigative, as in, okay, what's the sensation and is it changing? And so on and so forth. It's a little different.
Yeah, except do you ask that question?
Do I ask?
What's the sensation? Is it changing?
When I'm investigating it
Yeah.
or when I'm observing it,
Yeah, which?
I do.
You-
I do ask the question. Yeah.
So are you
So in-
investigating the question?
In other words, what I'm saying is that those practices I treat more like a vipassana practice,
Yeah.
and whereas the loving kindness is one of more of a shamatha.
So do your loving kindness and put your awareness on it. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think an argument could be made, and I think many have made the argument, that you begin by, if you're talking about the 4 mindfulness practices, I mean, it's good to have a model that you're working with, because otherwise there's 1,000 models and they can all become very confusing.
Yeah.
But the 4 foundations of mindfulness are so straightforward, like so easy to understand, but they are not easy to do. They're easy to understand. It's kind of like shamatha is easy to understand, but it's very difficult to sit without distraction, your mind resting on something for any extended period of time. But still, you're doing shamatha. The practice of shamatha is not to just rest with nothing going on. There's stuff going on. As a practice, it's about working with the stuff that goes on while you're resting with nothing going on, kind of. So shamatha also is difficult. And shamatha, I think you come to have a strong, stable shamatha. Then it's even better to do the 4 mindfulness practices. They'll bear even more fruit in that circumstance.
Yeah.
So that's why I say you actually have all the tools for this. So if you ask, what you're likely to get is a variation on the tools that you already have. And even if it looks like it's really quite different, it's quite likely that down the road a ways you're going to come to the conclusion that you've been cheated. Like, it's like I said, I didn't want a hamburger. Instead, I wanted a steak. And then you found out that actually what you got was a hamburger. Because the tool is all there. You have the 4 progressive things to rest your awareness on.
Right.
Mindfulness. All mindfulness. Nothing's easier than mindfulness. Where am I and what am I doing? It's pretty easy. But it's incredibly difficult to stabilize it. But the instruction's easy. Simple. Shamatha 2. Generate loving kindness. And then put your awareness on it. The problem you're going to have is the problem you've probably already encountered is loving kindness is also not stable. It changes into lust, or it changes into, I don't like them that much. And it morphs all the time. So it's kind of like the surface of the ocean under a breeze. It's like you can't find a place that is inherently stable. Everything's moving. And that's what then you find. You have compassion, it becomes loving kindness, and then you have a little bit of personal joy, and then you think like, no, that's my joy, there's something wrong with it. No, you're not, this really is not about you, so you go back to the loving kindness. If those things weren't happening, then it would be easy for everybody to have a very stable meditation. But short of having a great skill in the meditation or some deep realization, I think we're sitting on the surface of the ocean with undulating waves, and they never stop, day and night. And so the object cannot be that they are going to stop. If that's what we're judging our practice by, we will never do anything but fail. So I'm hearing a little bit of that from you, and just interpreting here a little bit, like that maybe you've got the wrong yardstick. You got a metric yardstick, and we're not using metric. And so your satellite always crashes on the moon because the measurements weren't right.
Thank you.
I don't know what else to say so much,
No,
but
perfect.
it's a great question. You're raising a question that easy to guarantee that there is not a single person who engages in these practices who doesn't come face to face with this very question. Why can't I stabilize it? It's inherently not stable.
I just haven't worked with it, and I'm it feels a little daunting. And certainly, visualizing has always been a challenge for me.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, depends on the object.
Yeah.
I can take different objects. I can even settle the mind in its natural state and watch the thought come up. I don't have a problem with that one. Only because I've become a little better since Alan taught us that practice. You also taught us that practice. But I've given up on visualizing. And now maybe I'm on a trip with this loving kindness thing.
Loving kindness.
Someday I'll work on it.
Someday I'll work on it. Yeah.
Could I just
Calendar it.
ask a clarifying question? The definition of compassion, isn't it wisdom and emptiness?
Oh, wisdom and emptiness.
Yeah. Totally not.
Yeah, sure. I mean, compassion is not one thing. Sometimes I think, though we might say it's kind of a low form of compassion, just feeling bad about somebody who's suffering is a level of compassion. And then up from that is feeling bad about some suffering of somebody who you don't like, and you feel that's a step up from suffering of somebody you care about, and you feel bad that they're suffering. Then to feel bad about the suffering of somebody you don't like, or you think they deserve the suffering, that sort of thing. We're just moving along there, but all of that is yet to encounter the union of the emptiness and compassion. But no one ever said you should throw away everything but the ultimate. So that would be a mistake, because the only person who would do that is someone who hadn't accomplished the ultimate. And so now they're throwing away the tool that actually finally gets you there. So,
Well, I guess the question for me is, what is Sabanj talking about then? Is he talking about
what are you talking about, Sue?
ultimate compassion, or are you talking about relative compassion? Relative compassion is the tools to ultimate compassion, right?
So what? Say that again.
Relative compassion are the tools to ultimate.
Yeah. I think it's more nuanced than this. We look for things that are really kind of fixed, that we can hit. I mean, it's like no one would play a game of darts in a bar in Wales if the dartboard was moved randomly in 1 foot increments every 33 seconds. They just wouldn't. And that's what we're doing. We're looking for something that's stable in a situation that is not stable. Our minds are not stable. We can kind of shut them down by virtue of really getting tight. You can have the experience of my mind is still, but it really isn't. It really isn't. So we're looking for something that we can recognize that is really the thing we're looking for. The problem is that what we're looking for we haven't seen. So we're not going to recognize it like you recognize other things. I think this is why, personally, I prefer, and I think I do best, when I rely upon the practice itself, not the result. And I can do Chenrezi, and if I don't like Chenrezi, I can do shamatha. And if I don't like shamatha, I can do some insight practice. And if I don't like the insight practice, I can do the 4 mindfulness practices. On and on and on. But when I fall into the trap of feeling bad that I haven't come to a result, things just go worse from there. They don't get better. Whereas, when I feel delighted to be engaged in the practice itself, the result is already there. All I really want is happiness. If I have happiness, then I don't care about the result. The result is already there. And the times when I have that are the times when I engage in the practice just because I'm finding the practice delightful. I mean, there have been times when I hated reciting a text. Really hated it. Like Chenrezig, for example. There have been times when I really disliked the practice of Chenrezig. It's been a while, but there were times when it was really bad. And I gotta say, one of my best times was when I opened the text to the beginning and had this kind of like reaction, like, I can't do it. And then I just had this sense of, no, you can do it. Just read it. Don't even pay any attention to what it means. And I can remember once just reading the text and feeling totally delighted, like, that's the first time I went through the text and just, I didn't even try to understand it, but it's the first time that I went through the text in 10 years like that. And it just like felt like cool. And I read it in English. And I just thought, oh, all this time, I know more after one reading than I did from all the time from before. And I felt delighted. And I did practices like that for a while, really. And it was enthusiastically enjoyable. Just enjoyable. And I wasn't looking for an outcome. I wasn't even looking for it to be enjoyable. But hey, I can read. I have eyes, I have a brain, I've been educated, I can read. I can understand what's being said. I don't relate to it. It's okay. I think it was, Sunday, Eric said a few things about relating to the practice in terms of the blessings in the text. I can remember that was a piece then. I thought, I'm going to just try that. Just imagine that reading it has got a blessing because of the people who have studied and practiced and all. Even though I haven't studied and practiced, somebody did, and they, like he was saying, read this text. They didn't read exactly this text, but they read the same words. So then I found, whoa, that's a discovery. It's interesting to read a text that had the same words. Exactly. That's kind of interesting. Think of thousands of people doing it, and all the people who attained realization and became renowned for it and said they got that realization from Chenrezig. And then I think, maybe I should take another look at this. So I think there's a way in which there's no simple thing here. You can't really fool yourself into thinking that you really do not care about the result. That's, you're just going to discover really fast, no, you're lying to yourself. But there's a skill there. There's a skill there. I could never play basketball. I can't dribble. I'm not tall enough. I could never play. I never really wanted to play. But when everybody was gone home, I would take a basketball sometimes and just dribble it around and shoot it in the basket. I didn't care whether it went in the basket or not. And it was great fun. And inadvertently, I got better at getting it in the basket. And it wasn't because I didn't really fully care. I was delighted when it went in the basket. And I never really played basketball, but I just think there's a trick there. There's a trick there. Can you just dribble around the court and enjoy yourself in the practice? And don't make up the practice. Just, it's like I didn't make my own basketball. I just took the one that was there, worked with it. It's okay. I didn't put up a basket and do everything. No, I just worked with what was there, and it was enjoyable, healthy, exercise. Everybody else was gone, so there was nobody there to ridicule me for not being able to do it right. I think there's something like that in these texts. It's like you got to do the thing and enjoy it. Sometimes we say fake it and enjoy it. I don't actually think you have to fake it. I think you just need to find, why are you even here? Why are we even doing this? Like, what are we trying to do here? Why are we trying to visualize that environment that doesn't exist to us? That's a good question. It's one of the things I like about our community here. There's no question that's out of bounds, ever. So we can ask all these questions. That's not true everywhere. Places where you ask certain questions and it is not, you do not get a good response.
The eyebrows go up to the ceiling and stay there.
Yeah, they stay. Yeah. I owned the basketball court when I was the only one on it. I owned it. I didn't think I won it. I was not self-conscious. I didn't care. I didn't beat myself up when I didn't go in the basket. It was totally delightful and fun. And when I did other things like that, you know, I used to play racquetball a lot. I especially liked going to the racquetball court with just a racket and the ball and me. And that's all. So there was no competition. It was like you just kind of like whack it around and run around the court. And it's delightful. When it's done, nobody won, nobody lost. Nobody's upset. Nobody's yeah, a lot of benefits.
So think of meditation as a sport.
Yeah, I mean, really, what's wrong with that? We learn things like that. I want to learn a little something about, like, how do they shoot some rocket and 12 years later it ends up at Jupiter? I mean, how does that happen? I mean, I can tell you, I'm the first one to Google that, find out, like, what is that? And there's nothing wrong. I think that, like, really building a sense of curiosity with our practice is really helpful. It's a lot more helpful than trying to fit what it is into what we think we already know. That's just a certain way to never have the direct experience. All right. Let's rejoice in our merit and dedicate it.
By
This virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. It's 3 o'clock. It's 3:10.
Got one sit left.